I'm going to give Joe a wait for a thumbs up before we got a pre-rise there. I like it, but we're good. All right. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. All right. First, we've got the approval of the memorandum of the August 2nd, 2021 regular meeting. A copy has been posted. I will make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second from Vice President Plunkett. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Memoranda of the August 2nd, 2021 regular town council meeting is approved by a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Amy, requests to speak. I think I've got one.
Yes, we do have one.
Very good. Erica Carpenter. If you can give your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Erica Carpenter. My residential address is 26 Cedar Crest. I also own 530 Home, which is located at 205 South Main Street. Good morning, and thank you for allowing me time to speak with you this morning. I'm here to speak in favor of resolution number 2021-15, only as it relates to the appropriation for motor vehicle highway number 0708, improvements to what is commonly known as the PNC lot located at Main and Sycamore. The two reasons I support and encourage you to support this are, number one, more available parking, and number two, to create, even if an interim solution, an entry that is welcoming to the village and to the town of Zionsville. First, more parking. And before I begin, I hope that you hear these comments as they are intended, not as complaints, but as to share with you what we as merchants experience so that we can work together for the best economically feasible solution. We talk a lot about parking in the village, whether it is a real or perceived issue. And so I want to share feedback with you from my real customers about their experienced inability to find parking. I pulled a few communications from the customers attempting to visit our town. I encourage you to think about this issue, not as it relates to us, the locals, but to folks who don't live here. From Brianna. Hello, I tried to visit your store today, but after 15 minutes of driving around and looking for a spot, I had to leave. Where should I try to park next time? We are from out of town and came just to go to your store, but gave up. From Tammy. Hi, Erica. I love your shop and spending the day in Zionsville, but what can you do about the parking? Every time I come, it is a problem. I live in Noblesville and we have 2-hour parking. Maybe try that. For the record, no, that's not my suggestion. As you know, people are already using the PNC lot, especially in the evenings and on Saturday mornings for the farmers market. Could we do nothing and just allow people to continue to do this? I mean, maybe. But I encourage, again, thinking about this from the perspective of visitors who may see cars there, but no signage or lines, and not be as willing to park there. And then secondly, oops, sorry. Secondly, and I'm trying to read the
Erica, we're in a reverb. We good, Joe?
I think we're good.
All right.
I think that was me.
I paused your time, so
okay, thanks.
go for it.
Secondly, and I'm trying to read the tea leaves a little here as to what some of your objections might be. Why would we do this work when a newer, larger, better gateway is on the horizon? And to that, I say it's been a year since the building was torn down and not much has physically happened. In my estimation, it's going to be years and not months for the larger vision to come to fruition and the development to occur. I hope we are all in agreement that the current state of the PNC lot is not how we want the entrance of our town to look, even for a shorter time period. Let's create a welcoming, clean, cared for entry that is representative of our beautiful village and town while the larger gateway project is underway. To recap, and I hope that I've communicated that I want you to think about this as a visitor, not as we locals think of it. We want to think about what they see when they arrive, the ease with which they can navigate parking, and how that will impact their return to Zionsville again and again. Thank you.
Thanks, Erica. Appreciate you speaking this morning.
No, that is all I received.
All right. Is there a mayor administration update?
No mayor administration update.
All right, maybe next time. Business, we've got the electronics meeting policy resolutions, resolution 2021-13. This actually doesn't necessarily need to be on the agenda because there aren't any changes here. We voted on this last time. And I think just for clarification purposes, this is really a resolution for how the council handles if there is a need to go remote. It's not necessarily how the public is able to interact with the council. That's really through the rules that we've set up. But basically, the setup is in a way that if the council is present, we want everyone to be present. And if the council is remote, then we would allow access for everyone to be remote. So pretty straightforward, and it's somewhat dictated by the state as well. Heather, anything to add to
Yeah,
that?
and I would just say it's been a little bit confusing maybe for some of the public because we've been operating pursuant to the governor's emergency order. The legislature actually allowed for a permanent opportunity for electronic meetings, which is different than we've had prior to the pandemic. So this would not impact an emergency order. So if we're all, the entire council's meeting electronically due to a public health emergency or any other public emergency, then the public would also be able to interact electronically, just like we have done over the last several months. This is really governing a longer term change so that if a member needed to be electronic for some reason and wanted to, request a permission to do so from the president of the council, this policy is really set up for how that individual would be required to participate. And we have information included in the resolution, for example, about ensuring that if you were a member participating electronically, that all the members of the public could hear you, see you. We would take a roll call vote to make sure that the public understood how you were voting. So it's really about governing the member participation. So just to make sure it's not confusing with the electronic meetings policy during a public health emergency, that's still going to go by the state's rules.
Thanks, Heather. Councilors, any questions on that? Pretty straightforward. Very good. That is it for old business. New business. First, we go to consideration of an ordinance amending the 2021 salary ordinance. This is ordinance 2021-09. Joe Keel, are you coming up? And I've also got Megan Nail here as well.
Thank you. In preparation for the 2021 budget, we identified a need to create a compensation strategy to guide how we hire and retain employees. The compensation study itself was funded in the 2021 budget, and we've now developed a comprehensive strategy based on market data, as well as providing kind of a framework to go forward with. I've included Megan Nail. She is the Vice President of Total Rewards Practice with First Person Benefits Advisors, big title, to go through, give a little bit more information on how the project developed. And we are both happy to answer any questions once that goes.
Good morning.
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 My cord is working. Apologies.
IT to the rescue.
Thank you. Sure. Okay, I can start in the interest of time while we get
Great.
that solved. So today I want to talk a little bit about the compensation work that we've done leading up to our recommendation today. So our goal is to create a compensation strategy that guides how we hire and retain top performing employees here at the town of Zionsville, achieve internal and external equity, so both within the town and outside to the greater market, reduce turnover, and then also increase your employee loyalty, engagement, and performance. And what we did was really put together a program that was based on relevant and current market data. And then also, as Joe said, to provide a framework for both now and in the future on how compensation is handled here. So we had a couple of key steps to this process that we went through. First, we updated and reviewed all of the job descriptions. Actually, Joe and her team did that. And with that process as a foundation, we really gathered input from the employee, the department head, and HR to make sure that we had a solid understanding of what those jobs were going into the compensation program. And then we had to, once we had the job descriptions updated, second, go out and compare those to the market. And you may wonder exactly who we compared that to. Thank you. So as I said, first we reviewed the job descriptions and updated them and then compared them to the market. So we really used a variety of compensation survey sources to do that market comparison. Of course, we focused on government, public administration, and municipalities within the Indianapolis metro. We are really looking at those who are similar in employee size, revenue, and operating budget. And then you can see there that we included specific surveys from other municipalities, including Lebanon, Whitestown, Carmel, Fishers, Noblesville, Westfield, and Brownsburg, along with others. So we really tried to take a comprehensive view of what the market was in compensation. So then we used that data to create salary ranges based on what that market data was. And you can see there's a range, minimum, midpoint, and maximum. And we took the market data that we gathered and we based the midpoint, that middle point of what the range is, on the middle of the market data, or the 50th percentile. And these salary ranges and the way that we put them together really represent compensation best practices and the relationships between the positions at the town of Zionsville. The nice thing about having salary ranges is they provide a meaningful opportunity for employees to grow financially within their current role. So as they gain additional skills, experience, job performance, it gives them a chance to really move forward and gain that salary increase within their role. So when we talk about how this would be implemented in practice, the ordinance would really show the entire range, but the budget itself would be actual dollars. So how that would work, and we've done this with other municipalities, I'll use Plainfield as an example, we would have the range for each position, and then you would set a budget for what the overall increase would be for that budget year. So for example, say it was a 3% increase, we would create that budget, you would create the budget, and then we would figure out how to allocate that within the range so that each person is within their salary range, but we can also recognize those things like performance and growth and so forth. This really allows for flexibility and recognizing individual performance and other factors, but appropriate budget controls that we would work within as all of you would establish. So as we looked at how your current employees individually compared to those new ranges, there are just a few employees who are below the minimum of what the new ranges are. So we would be asking for additional appropriation to bring these employees to the minimum of the new range. So they're within what those market salary ranges are. Oops. And then compensation increases going forward. Again, as we said, we would bring employees to the minimum of the salary range if needed, and then just continue to refine the performance evaluations and use them as a tool to recognize that high performance with increased compensation within the established market range. Joe, is there anything I forgot that you wanted to add?
I think that's it, unless there are specific questions.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Megan. Counselors, any questions on this ask, what this means?
So when you look at the compensations of those that fall below the minimum, why wouldn't you want to bring them at least to the bottom of the, not just to the minimum, but a little above the minimum, because you're pushing them to the bare lowest to make them competitive?
Right, what we would like to do is today or with the next pay period, bring them up to the minimum. We'll continue to work through what is the process to bring people. The goal is eventually for people to be at least the midpoint. But today, number one, that's a much bigger compensation ask. And so we want to, first steps are getting them to the minimum, and then we'll work through how everybody kind of moves through those bands.
Okay, so you do have a long-term plan
Oh,
to
sure.
get
Yes.
them. to
Yep.
it. Okay.
We will have a long-term plan.
And this may be a silly question. I think I know the answer to that, but in compensation plans for municipal employees, are there ever any structures built in where there is a incentive plan during a bonus structure or a performance bonus instead of getting pay raises throughout the year? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah, using more of a bonus or some instead of a base pay increase. That I would say is not very common in this particular industry. We know in private industry that is common. I think it's something you could consider, but at this point, I think focusing on the base pay would be most common and probably most prudent at this point.
Okay.
Just a quick question. So again, I think I kind of touched on this earlier, but when you go to budget, you're not going to budget based off of the maximums of all these salaries. Is that correct?
Correct. It would be budgeted off of just a common percent, and then we would work within that to determine where people fall within the range. No, it would not be budgeted off the maximum of the salary ranges.
Thank you.
How often do you have to re-survey to make sure the ranges are appropriate?
We could look at, depending on how the market moves, which we're seeing a lot of market movement right now. If we needed to in the midterm, we could bring the ranges up by a percentile each year, a certain common percent to reflect that. But in general, a full market study would be every couple of years. It's pretty foundational work, so you don't have to do that every single year.
Yeah, similar question. When was the last time we did this assessment?
I don't know.
Yeah.
There's pieces and parts of what appear to be surveys in, like I've been here just more than a year. So based on files that I've seen, there's pieces and parts of that, but I don't know when the last full-blown town-wide survey was.
Yeah. So we may just be playing some catch up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joe, there's a additional appropriation request next related to salaries. Is that related to then the ranges?
Yeah, it's 26,000 to bring people up to the minimum, or the additional expense for 2021 will be 26,000, and then we'll roll those base pays into 2022, into the budget for 2022.
And given that's on the same agenda, and this is an ordinance that requires 2 votes, is the ask here if the council approves to suspend the rules and go through,
Yes.
get this all done today? Okay. Councilors, any other questions? Well, I'd make a motion to approve. I think it's a good idea. I appreciate Joe you doing this. Second from Councilor Culp. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Ordinance 2021-09 is approved or is introduced on first reading with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. I will make a motion then to suspend the rules so we can vote on this twice today. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Was it Councilor Trailer?
It was a toss up.
Well,
Yeah.
it's Councilor Trailer, Amy. All in favor of suspending the rules?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion to suspend the rules does pass with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Then I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 2021-09 on final reading. Any seconds on that? Second from Council Burke this time. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Ordinance 2021-09 is adopted with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Thanks, Joe. Next, we've got a consideration of an additional appropriation resolution. This is resolution 2021-15. This is actually a lot of different moving pieces here. So we've got some from salaries, some from Mr. Lance, some from Mr. Logston, from Parks. This is also a public hearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the public hearing. If anyone wants to speak on this matter, I know Ms. Carpenter already spoke originally on this matter, but if anyone else wants to speak on this, I've got proof of publication. Please feel free to come to the podium. All right, I will close that public hearing. Councilors and public, what we're going to do, what I'd like to do is go through this one by one, and then in the situation of parks where we have 3 requests, go through those one by one. So there'll actually be 5 votes by my count here on what we're going to talk through here. So the first up is a general funds appropriation for salaries. Joe, are you presenting on this? We're doing online presentations, Heather?
Well, I think we were going to until the September meeting when we
Got it.
changed the rules, but
All right.
for the administration, probably next time we should be prepared in person.
Okay. Tammy, are you there?
Just promoted her. She should be there now.
Tammy?
Hi, I am here.
Gotcha.
So this additional appropriation, as was mentioned in the previous presentation, was to bring the employees up to the minimum. So it's a small request for the amount that you see, less than the 30,000. And we would be asking for council approval. This would be effective in the next pay period through the end of the year.
Very good.
Hey, Joe, could we get the volume up a little bit? I'm having a hard time hearing.
Councilor Short, do you need Tammy to repeat that?
No,
You got it?
yeah,
Okay.
I got the gist of it.
Councils, any questions for Tammy on this? Or I'm sure Joe could answer them too if we needed them, if they were not financial necessarily, but just conceptual. Any motions on this? Well, I'll make a motion to approve because I think it's good for our employees and our employees are good for us.
Second.
Second from Councilor Burke. Was it question, was an exclamation point? Did I hear that right? Did you second it?
I did.
Oh,
Yeah.
second from Vice President Plunkett. Sorry. Thank you. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? All right, the general fund salaries additional appropriation resolution 2021-15 passes with a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Next, we've got the motion on the motor vehicle highway appropriation for the parking lot. Mr. Lance, are you speaking on this one?
Sure, happy to. Good morning. Most of you are familiar with this site that's been in gravel since the demolition of a couple buildings about a year ago. We've done some in-house design on a parking lot schematic that will extend basically what we call the friendly parking lot there to the south. It will eliminate one drive cut onto Main Street. So there'll be an entrance off Main Street, entrance off First Street to this parking area annex, and it will provide 46 new parking spaces downtown, which more than doubles the existing friendly parking lot. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question on that. I was driving by there yesterday. I was thinking about this. So will the whole thing be torn up so it's all even grade between both sides? And because if you see, there's like 3 weird parking spots right by where it touches the gravel. Would that be extended so that you can get?
Yes, where
parking
the locksmith building used to
Yes.
be. Yes, that is going to be made hard surface and parking will be available there as well.
I guess my question is that 125,000, I believe, is what the request
Correct.
is. Does that include tearing up the old one so it's all level, or are you just adding on to the current one?
Both. There is a blending of elevations necessary to tie into the existing one. So yeah, this is it gets into the south end of the existing parking lot just enough to correct one little low spot as well as make a smooth transition into the new area.
Now, will you keep that same opening on First Street that's there?
Yes.
And then you're going to add one on Main Street as well?
No, we're taking one away on Main Street. There are 2 on Main Street currently into the old site and one on First Street.
Yeah.
We're taking out the southernmost entrance off Main Street, which is the one closest to the traffic signal.
The one that used to go to the bank?
Where you used to come out of the bank.
Yeah.
Yes, that one goes away.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a visual of how this will look.
Sure. But the existing street cuts remain the same.
Okay.
So knowing nothing about how gravel spaces work, is there in deference to Erica's point about needing more parking spaces, is there something we can do with that gravel space to temporize it until we get the master plan or the plan in place for the gateway project of lining even the gravel and because it seems like if we're going to do something in the next year or two, that spending $125,000 is kind of a waste of money if we're going to redo that for an additional purpose in the future. We can put up a temporary sign that says parking available here and then even over gravel to line the space. I don't know anything.
Yeah, there's real no practical way to mark gravel because it would be obliterated very quickly through use. The biggest, we would have to enlarge the gravel because right now the gravel was just put in place where the old facilities were ripped out. So it would have to be enlarged. You'd have to expand the gravel. So we would have to do some work to a gravel lot. But the biggest problem with that is ADA accessibility for all types of users. Gravel is not considered an ADA surface. So it is not an accessible parking lot if it were just gravel.
You not have a gravel parking lot? I mean, I'm with Councilor Choi, spending 120. If I told my wife I wanted to spend $125,000 on something I was going to rip up in 2 years, she wouldn't be happy with me. And I don't know how happy the voters would be if we said we're going to spend $125,000 of their money. If it was a permanent solution, I have no problem with it.
Sure.
But can we not promote it as parking if it's gravel, if it's not ADA accessible? Can we add a few additional spots? Are there other things that we can do outside of temporarily paving something for a year?
Perhaps, but again, the management of the site would be probably difficult because it would be constant maintenance. I can't think of any way to stripe this to tell people where to park that would be reliable at all. It would probably be like a weekly or bi-weekly exercise to go down and repaint stones, I guess. I don't know. Certainly it could exist in gravel. Our development standards don't allow for gravel parking lots. So it would kind of be flying in the face of our own development standards. But certainly I recognize that this is temporary. How temporary is that going to be? I don't know. But we could make some accommodations in the gravel area, but we'd have to revisit that. I don't know if I can speak to the specifics off the top of my head this morning.
You can't plow that either, can you?
No, you can't plow gravel. Yeah.
Can you come back with some other ideas before we just write a $125,000 check?
We sure can.
Or do we know anything about timeline on
That
the
was my question.
Gateway project.
gateway project? Do we have any?
I don't know, but we've all seen development occur. And I think that the minute you have a project, you're probably at least a year out. So I don't know. I can't speak to the timing of the gateway project. But
who would be the person? Because I think I would like to hear that presentation before I vote on this, because I want this done. I agree with everybody else. We're just going to tear this up in a year. Now, if it's a 5-year plan, I have no problem paving this.
Okay, we can certainly pull together some information on the gateway to put some type of timeline to it. I'm not pushing for this at all, but we have a contractor in place. We have not pulled anything, but our intent was to change order this into an existing contract. So we are backing up kind of against the end of the season and the opportunity there. So perhaps if we can come back and make some type of decision at the next meeting, we could still get that in there yet this year.
I have a question, Lance. Is it possible that, I know gravel's permeable, right? For rainwater and so forth. Is adding this surface going to potentially create any flooding opportunity for north of the village, or excuse me, not north of the village, but into the village? Is there any flooding? Are we doing anything for drainage? Are you just laying out asphalt and no curbing, or what's
the lot will be sloped to the existing drainage patterns. Now gravel, a type 53 gravel, which is down there now, is considered impermeable. You might as well have asphalt because of that gravel's composition. So once it's down and compacted, it seals itself off. But there's more than adequate drainage along Main Street. It goes to a 30-inch storm sewer. And remember, the site used to be largely impervious surface as well. So no, there's not any concerns on that.
drainage? Okay.
Does this request include signage or anything like that, to Eric's point, being able to direct people that this is a parking lot that they can't park?
We can
there?
make it include signage, sure. We have a small sign. We have signs on the main street that says public parking. You can mimic those signs as well to make it clear to people they can park there.
So I think what would be helpful, Lance, I guess, is two things. One is, I think it's important to understand, this is not necessarily on you, but whoever owns the Gateway project, understand where is that? What's the timing? What's the likelihood of it happening? All these sorts of things. And then I think my ask would be is if you would also be prepared to come up with alternatives to what this is. What are the costs of those alternatives? What is the benefits of those? What are the detractors of those?
Sure.
To give us a full picture. If it's $15,000, making up numbers, to have more gravel, more signs, striping it every 2 weeks, because we're going to tear it all up in a year, I think that'd be important for the council. to
Sure.
know.
Happy to do that.
So with that, I would make a motion to continue this request for appropriation until the next meeting.
I would second that.
Get a second from Councilor Culp. All in favor of that continuation? Aye. Anyone opposed to that continuation?
Nay.
Okay, the motion to continue the additional appropriation for MVH on the parking lot passes with a vote of 6 in favor, 1 opposed.
Yeah, Josh, before we move on, I got passed down the signature page for this resolution. I know we were voting individually, but in the resolution itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's only for the salary ordinance.
Okay.
So
All
I'm
right.
sorry to confuse you all. So we're gonna have a signature page since they were all kind of put together. You'll have a signature page and at the very bottom, it'll say what it's for. It should say salary ordinance, or salaries at the very bottom. So as we send them down, we'll do them one at a time.
This is resolution 2021-15. Right?
Look at the bottom of the signature page.
Just hand wrote it, just so
Yeah.
so it says salary since they were all
I
lumped
see. Okay.
into
All
one.
right.
The ordinance was prepared with everything, so we're just gonna do them one by one on a signature page.
Okay. I see.
We weren't expecting that Thomas Jefferson
Yeah,
Yeah.
style.
I'm not sure which one of you is the doctor,
that would be me. It's my writing gets worse by the day.
Brian, are you okay with that?
but yeah, I'm good with that. I
Okay.
just didn't understand what I was looking at here.
Very good. Next up, we've got 3 requests from the Parks and Recs. Jared, if you mind coming up, what I'd ask you to do is just talk about one and then we'll vote on it and then talk about another and we'll vote on it down the line.
All right, good morning, counselors. Before you are 3 projects, the first of which is in response to a very kind donation that is on the table for the town. Jim and Nancy Carpenter have purchased 216 acres of the old Wolf Run Golf Course with the intention of turning that into a nature preserve. Now, on that site also, there is a large clubhouse, which could potentially be the permanent home for our nature center, which has been a staple in this community for the last 19 years. Before you is a request for the services of master planning that site to better understand what restoration options are available, what park amenities we can implement, and whether we can rehabilitate the existing structures or if a new facility would be needed. So this is kind of time sensitive as the Parks Foundation comes online, which will be a new funding mechanism and support and partner for the Parks Department as we move forward with planning large projects in the future. So the hope is to begin this project this fall, wrapping up next spring to have documents ready to begin to advertise and publicize the future park that's coming online as we ask for donations and appropriations in the future for those projects. So we request to work with REA on this and encapsulate the vision of the Carpenters as we set out to nearly double the parkland in our facility or in our park system. So that's the first one on the table.
Jared, the total amount here is $150,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Very good. Councilors, questions on this? I know many of you have toured this land, and again, we're grateful to the Carpenters for their generosity in this matter. Any questions on this?
Jared, has it been donated or is it, my understanding was the proposal was that there could be a donation as long as the town was making a financial commitment to purchase.
Correct. It's kind of a hybrid. So the land was purchased for a larger sum than the Carpenters would ask as the town becomes involved in that and the land transfers over. So it would be a partial purchase and also partial donation as the town accepts the land.
So this is $150,000 to do kind of a preliminary study, right?
So this would lay down the conceptual planning of the site, encapsulating kind of what we envision for the nature preserve as far as habitat restoration and park amenities, and also take a comprehensive look at the existing infrastructure. Nice thing about our golf courses, there are some pathways and bridges and a clubhouse, which if we can salvage that, it already looks like something from Jurassic Park. It fit right in with the nature center theme that could potentially go out there. Any pathways, at least the foundation of removing the asphalt and repaving is already going to have that compacted ground. So it's nice to be able to accommodate those paths and save a little money there. But the carpenters on their own merit are already beginning restoration work as well as engineering studies on the bridges. So this master plan would envelop those studies as well as we move forward, as well as provide an opportunity for public engagement in the final steps to make sure that both the town's vision and what we need in our park system is upheld, the carpenter's vision is upheld, and also the public have the opportunity to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I had a chance to tour it. I mean, it's pretty remarkable what's just happens to be available. And I agree with you. What's kind of shocking is how in disrepair some of that's already happened. Like even the bridge is like, be careful that we don't fall in, you know, and the paths and everything else. My concern is spending $150,000 and the council at some point is going to have to make a determination of what we do with this in terms of funding. And my understanding is this is $3 or $4 million. Now there's a foundation set up, but that's a huge outlay. And I'm not sure what the council or this town is going to be on the line for. And $150,000 is a lot of money if in fact we don't have an appetite or we don't see a path forward, particularly in my opinion, how much money is the foundation going to be able to raise toward, they may raise all that. They're generous folks in the town who may want to underwrite the whole project. So that's my only concern. When I saw it, I'm like, this makes perfect sense. The price tag looks pretty steep to me, not knowing what the full outcome is going to be from the town. So I'd hate to outlay the cash and then we decide there's not a funding mechanism or the foundation couldn't raise the kind of cash they need to. And is this town prepared to spend a few $1 million to do this? I don't know that that's if we would or wouldn't. So that's my only concern is the price tag with some uncertainty of what's happening down the road. If that makes sense.
Absolutely, makes perfect sense. And this was our effort of due diligence to kind of understand, you know, before we accept this gift and look at funding and transferring the land over to understand what those costs are going to be, not only for a facility, but also what it's going to take to create this into a park from an old golf course that's kind of let invasives and other components of nature take back over. So doing our due diligence to ensure that this is something that we can make successful as we plan for the future.
This is the piece you'd bring back to us to see if it's worth it.
Absolutely. We would have numbers for renovating the facility, transforming the parkland into a park, and kind of a phasing if that was necessary on what that would look like.
You and I have a tour this afternoon, so we haven't, I think the rest of you have all seen it. Joe and I are going up this afternoon to take a look at it, and so we'll defer to you on whether you think it'll be worth it. But one of the things when I was campaigning was that by and large, the residents of Zionsville value their the parks and recreation in Zionsville almost above a lot of other things. So it seems like that this is something well spent to invest in such a large area that would be a big benefit to the town. So I'm supportive if those of you that have visited already think that it's worth looking at. So I'll defer to you guys as to whether it's a good investment to take a look at it.
Would it? Oh, I'm sorry, Jason. I mean, we could, if we wanted, defer this until next meeting so you can both have a chance to look at it. I'd want you to make.
You said it was time sensitive.
Just the larger picture of getting these, you know, these site renderings and understanding costs as we move into next year with the Parks Foundation. So time sensitive relative to 2021, getting this started.
I would be okay. I would be happy with that.
I'd be happy with that too. Okay. Jason,
Yeah,
we want to stop the conversation, but just an option we have available to us.
I was just going to ask you, you mentioned that the carpenters are doing, their work, and this is to start some of our work. I'm assuming that this master planning would include them all along the way, correct?
Absolutely, yeah.
'Cause I just don't want everybody going separate directions, right? And then you come to us with something that they didn't see the vision.
Absolutely. They would be the primary stakeholders along with the town. And every step of the way, it's going to be a united vision. Prior to even releasing it to the public to have their input for the final kind of pieces.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions, counselors?
Is it public information yet what the carpenters are willing to donate versus what we're gonna actually spend on this project?
I don't know that that's been released to the public yet, and I wouldn't want to speak for the carpenters. I'm sure they'd be happy to present as well. I just think it's a unique opportunity that they have done these large purchases and restoration efforts around the country. So the fact that they're willing to invest in Zionsville and do that right here where they've called home for the past couple decades is monumental, and just speaks to the volume of our park system and Zionsville as a whole. So.
Well, personally, I want everyone to feel they're making an informed decision. I think this is important to do, but I want you two a chance to tour it like some of us have. Just watch out for the ticks. Right. So I would make a motion to continue this request to the next meeting. Get a second from Councilor Melton. All in favor of continuing? Aye. All opposed? Okay, so on, make sure I read this right. Resolution 2021-15, the Carpenter Nature Preserve Master Planning will be continued by a vote of 7-0 to the next meeting. Next, we've got the conceptual planning for a community center. Jared?
So identified in the previous current master plan was the need for indoor recreation facilities. One of the common complaints is we have an amazing park system, but as the snow starts falling, our recreational activities become limited, and a large portion of our community goes to other communities for those services. So this is just that first step to kind of conceptualize what Zionsville would want inside a facility, understand what that footprint would look like, begin to analyze where that would make sense. We have 2 sites within the conceptual planning document to look at, which would be Zion Aqua's 12 acres. They've agreed to move forward and look at this, as well as 875 next to Heritage Trail Park, and just understanding whether a community center with the needs of Zionsville could fit in either of those locations, or if there's some limiting factor where we need to look to somewhere in the future. So this is a very large project, 5, 10, 15 years. It just, the timeline is variable, but this is that first step in that direction. And it'd be nice to include this foundation into the next master planning to gauge the appetite as we move forward. So this conceptual planning would not only survey the community extensively and create a lot of community engagement to understand what goes in the facility, but it also give us a staffing plan, maintenance operations, upkeep, and then final price tag for the facility as we move forward and make better educated guesses in the future as this forms. So earlier this year, the Parks Department issued an RFP for these services. We had 7 firms respond. From that, we created a review committee of department heads, the mayoral administration, and Parks Board. And we whittled it down to 4 firms who interviewed in person or virtually. And from those, unanimously, the review committee selected Perkins and Will. So the request is for $125,000 to conduct this conceptual planning community engagement study with Zionsville.
So I'm guessing you've reached out to other municipalities in the area. Are they at a point where they feel that their capacity is reaching certain limitations where they would welcome another community center and neighboring community to be able to decompress what they're feeling as well?
Actually, the trend of kind of the Indy Metro right now is to build these facilities. Fishers is also bringing one online. Lafayette just brought theirs as well. And there are a lot of concerns, especially in the COVID era, of what if you have this facility that no one can utilize. But these aren't the traditional, workout room and pool. These facilities really are for the community. They're supposed to be versatile. They're a meeting space. They're municipal action centers as emergency strike. So they really are multiple hats under one roof. So part of the nice thing about this is, as a town, we would also guide how this essentially a business plan for the facility is shaped. And for instance, in West Lafayette, their goal was to create this as a net neutral facility. So as those costs for operations and upkeep came about, they would also create the revenue to subsidize that completely. So as we would move forward in that study, we would set those benchmarks and create a system that could support that. So not to be a continual drag or reoccurring cost on the tax dollar, we would kind of set the parameters of what we found acceptable in our community for recreation and indoor community gathering spaces.
Jared, what I'm concerned about is it was just a month ago, this body passed a 20-year bond to build a new library system that's going to be in Whitestown. And when I asked a lot of questions about what's the future 20 years out, 10 years out, 5 years out of libraries, and I appreciate it, and I was the person who voted no on this council, was that in essence, what I heard was we're building a community center. Yes, there may or may not be books. I don't know what electronics will look like, but this was a great place for meeting space. This is a great place for a number of the things you already mentioned. My concern is polling the community on what they want. They already have. It's going to be built. They just don't know it's there yet. So in essence, you're asking people very much the same questions they answered before when they were in favor of the library. So however you do this, it's gonna be hard for you to say, these things are coming. You don't know they're here yet. What do you want? I'm afraid we're going to come back with a report after we spend $125,000 of. We have full support for a community center, and then we're going to end up with duplicative services after we spend millions of dollars. So I don't know what the answer is other than that facility is not in place yet. We don't even fully know what it's going to look like other than, and what I heard a lot of was it's going to be a library, but it's also going to be a community center. All of Zionsville is paying for that because we're going to drive up there and use it. So my concern, and I voiced this, which was not only Zionsville, but Whitestown have both talked about building community centers. And is this going to some way get in the way of us being able to build something here? And I think it very well may. So I have a lot of concerns that we're going to spend a lot of money to ask people for something that is already coming and they don't know what it is yet. And we're stepping on our toes. And I know we can't wait till that's fully built and in operation, but it's just a messy situation, which is one of the reasons I tried to avoid the bond issue on the last meeting.
The Monon Center in Carmel, which I think is very nice, cost $55 million to build. And they started upgrading it already, and it was built in 2016. I've not had anyone come to me and say they want a community center. I have no desire to spend money on a community center, and I don't have any money to have desire to spend money on planning for a community center. Because I think Council Burke's point, you're going to ask people and say, oh yeah, I do want that. And then how do we pay for it? So this is a no for me if it goes forward. That's the will of the council, but it'll be a no for me every time this comes up.
For me, I've had a number of people that asked for some place where they could gather and some place that is more like a Monon for the area. But, it's how strong that sentiment is, I have no idea. And do we really have the appetite to spend $55 million for that? I don't know, but I feel like we should get a better assessment of what the public really wants before we go into this. So I'm not opposed to doing this, but I'd like a better understanding of what the community wants before we outlay this.
Well, I think if you ask the community, they want sidewalks and, connectivity. And I mean, that's what, at least in my district, and this is where this would go, right? Potentially over on 875 in my district. And I've got people more concerned with having access to the village from out by Craig and I to allow for connectivity. Even the one that was mentioned earlier in West Lafayette was $34 million. I mean, that's a lot of money to put into, to Councilor Burke's point, to put into something that potentially is already going to be built in a neighboring community, not to mention what they're going to do at the rec site when they finish their community center over there. I mean, there's going to be a lot of opportunity around here. So
And one of the questions, Jared, that I asked was because of what the neighboring municipalities were saying about their community centers is because we do, it's because although we're Zionsville and they're Carmel and, you know, we have Lebanon and all that, we do share resources with each other. And it's not just out of civic pride, we should build our own community center. Are they at a point where their capacity succeeded so that we need to basically pony up and build our own so that we can start adding to the capacity of other people to provide that service as well. That was why I asked that question and I don't know the answer to that because I haven't been to the Monon Center in ages. So we don't know what that looks like. But to that point, you know, do we need to spend $55 million? Maybe you guys have been to the Monon Center in the wintertime more recently than I have, whether or not they're overcrowded. So out of convenience sake of driving 15 minutes more, is it worth it to build a Zionsville one? That, I guess, is the question.
I've never used the indoor part of that. It's always the outside water part.
We did when the kids were younger.
You did go work out and swim lessons and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know that would be 50 some million. I mean, and that's the other question. It may be that it's 20 million. We don't know. I'm just, and I'm in favor of a community. I mean, I think we do need a community center. I'm just of the opinion that we may have just built one without fully knowing what all it's going to accommodate. I'd be willing to, again, ask the community what they're interested in. I just think it's hard to ask people what they're interested in. And I know you're going to get a favorable, I can guarantee it. It's just a question of how would you ask those questions in light of the fact that we already have a library that is going to be serving in some capacity to meet some of those needs, if that makes sense. And is there a way, Jared, to trim this back from 125K to do something else? And do we even have enough information, in your opinion, to have a really valid survey without knowing what's fully going to be coming? And we've already made that investment. I mean, that's going to be a significant footprint. I know it's in Whitestown, but that's the decision that we made.
So Jared, this 125,000 you're asking for, what is it going towards exactly?
So this 125,000 would be for 3 events and a campaign for community engagement to better understand what Zionsville would like in their facility. It would also take a regional temperature of the market of what amenities are out there. So completely agree. We're not looking to duplicate, what's right next door. So we would provide something unique and what is requested in Zionsville, but not to be a mirror image of any nearby facility at all. So this would encapsulate what the community is recommending, understand the footprint of what that would look like. So the largest component is whether this includes aquatics or not, right? So that is going to add to the price tag exponentially. So if Zionsville doesn't request, a 50-meter pool or more indoor swimming space, then that decreases our price tag. We understand that. It decreases our footprint, and we can look at that. So it's just, there are some unknowns, and this was to take that step to better understand what Zionsville wants today, what's going to serve them for the next 50 years.
Was there a poll or something that was already done that led us to the idea that this was a need? Because I'm, like you said, I'm not hearing it from people. People come and ask for stuff all the time, and this is one that I'm not hearing. So I'm just, what spurred this?
It has been identified and mentioned in the last 2 master plans. So for the past 10 years, it has shown up on our studies of the community. So we might have a closer pulse of the recreation enthusiasts of our community, because that's who we directly serve most often. So this was just, again, preparing to take that next step. And should that be required on the next master plan, we would have this conceptual planning done by February to include in that for next year, which would create the 2023 adoption of the next master plan.
Jared, it just seems like it's a hefty price tag. Why would we not? And I get that this is 5 years down the road. And again, I'm in favor of the concept. And in fact, I like the aquatics component myself. That's just me personally, without seeing anything else or any data or any price tag. we're budgeting now for 2022, and I know I'm going to be meeting with you after this meeting to look at budgets. Why is this something that can't be considered for the 2022 budget? Knowing that the timeline is pretty far out, and we're trying to still get a better sense of what is going to be happening at the Whitestown Library. I get that you want to get this done, but I feel like we're maybe forcing in a pretty big price tag in 2021 when we could also roll this into 2022. It doesn't feel like, as opposed to say salaries, we need to do that now. We need to bump those up. That was 26 Gs. I mean, we could spend another 26 and get everyone in this town to mid-range, so I mean, I'm aware of not just where each penny's going, but what else could we be doing with those dollars to benefit, current employees of the town.
Yeah. And the expedition of now, as opposed to 2022, was just to ensure that this, the community surveying was conducted over the winter, and then this document could be folded into our master planning as we begin that with the 2022 year.
I would highly discourage doing any polling this winter, only because I'm just guessing, but I don't foresee this building getting reopened anytime before the end of the year. I don't have any say in that. If I had a say, it'd be open today. But if you poll people and ask them what they'd like, and one of the options is meeting space, we've got a lot of meeting space here that they cannot use. So they're going to say they need meeting space because you're polling them in a time that we've cut off their meeting space.
Understood.
So
Yeah.
I would not poll anyone until at least this building's been open for a while, and I can't get a timeline on when that'll be.
I want to qualify something I said earlier. I do have residents asking for a community center, but I think what I want to qualify what I meant before. What they have been asking me for is something more akin to what we are envisioning with the library, not an aquatic center. Not like a Monon Center or something to that effect. In my mind, of what they're talking about is a place where the community can gather, have receptions, events, things of that nature. I don't think that the aquatic center is necessarily what they're envisioning. So, yeah, I don't really have much of a care one way or the other on this. I feel the leanings of the rest of the council.
So when we built this building, it cost $10 million, and it was pretty controversial, and we had to find some pennies to do it, and it was the right decision. I wish it was open to Councilor Trailer. It was the right decision to do it, but it was hard to fund it, but we found a way. And again, I think it was a good idea. My concern in spending $125,000 to ask the community is you're asking them, what do you want? Like, there's no sort of budget cost implications of that. So yeah, I'm sure I'll take a bowling alley. Yeah, I'll take a diving pool. Yeah, I'd love that. But when it all comes back and it's 50 million, 30 million, whatever it is, we can't figure out how to pay for it, or how do you pay for it? I think that's the missing piece, right? And so now we spent $125,000 to ask people for their opinion. Their opinion is they want something, and we have to tell them, well, we can't have it because we can't afford it. Well, now we just wasted $125,000. So I think that money can be better spent. I think it'd be better spent on things like the Carpenter Nature Preserve, quite honestly. That is my take on this request. Any other questions on this, Counselor? I appreciate you standing up there, Jared, when we're making all these comments. All right, any motions on this?
Make a motion to deny this $125,000 for the planning of a community center.
There's a motion to deny from Councilor Trailer.
Second.
Second for Vice President Plunkett. Amy, I'm going to do a roll call on this. Counselors, if you are saying yes when she asks your name, you are saying yes to the denial. If you're saying no, then you are against denying the request. Amy?
President Garrett,
Yes.
Vice President Plunkett,
Yes.
Councilor Burke,
Yes, and Jared, I'm saying that in the context of this vote today, not that we don't think that there may be value down the road.
Thank you.
Councilor Choi,
Yes.
Councilor Culp,
Yes.
Councilor Melton,
Yes.
Counselor Trailer.
Yes.
Okay, so motion for the community center conceptual planning is denied by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Last up, Jared, we've got golf course path improvements.
Yep. So early on in surveying our parks and golf course, this was quickly identified not only through my observations, but also feedback from the users of the course. Kind of just the condition of our cart paths, how they've kind of deteriorated over the year due to seasonal flooding and other situations that have just eroded the cart paths. So the flooding issue and getting rid of that water quicker is something we're working on internally to incorporate into this as well. But before you is a request for $450,000 to improve the most kind of deteriorated components of the golf course pathways and lay in and attach onto the conditions of the cart paths that are still acceptable, and also to change a little bit of grading and make some of the pathways a little bit more safe. So some of it is gravel at this time, which experiences seasonal washout. And just riding around them, it's not that fun of a ride after you bump around for a while. So just to improve the quality of our course, we just started leasing new golf carts, which people are very appreciative of. No longer are they sticking to the duct tape on the seats, but they have a nice ride. So this kind of goes in hand with that, making that capital investment to improve play at the course. So we're having an exceptional year at the golf course. Give you a little context. In 2016, we had about 60 rounds of golf played per day. Right now, we're featuring about 123 rounds per day. So we've just seen exceptional growth ever since the pandemic kind of took hold. Golf became a safe sport you could do on your own. And from that, I think there's kind of a rebirth in our community and the region and the nation, honestly, about golf. And there's a renewed interest. So I'd like to make this investment in the facility and improve the experience as more and more people in Zionsville and the neighboring communities experience our municipal course. And the reason for the appropriation now, as opposed to next year, is to limit our disturbance into next year. So this fall, we're going to tear up the course, have to reseed and let those greens heal. So doing that now, as opposed to impacting most of the 2022 season, seems advantageous to me, especially as we're having record revenue every single month.
And no knock on you at all, because I think you're doing a phenomenal job there at the parks. And you weren't here, excuse me, last year for budgeting, but just, look for these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, going forward. I know you weren't part of this, so I totally understand the ask. But yeah, just as you're going around the parks, look for these things so we can put them into the budget rather than ask for additional appropriations.
Yep. So yeah, kind of the vision, my vision with the department is you have to split growth and upkeep 50-50. You can't have something nice, new and shiny, and then something else, deteriorating. So absolutely.
This is just for the cart paths too, correct? This isn't a redesign or anything of the.
Correct. So our golf manager, Mike Wall, has a fantastic idea about changing the layout of the course. So currently hole 1 is right next to Temple Road. And as you start your morning, we are, you can kind of get your bearings, and a lot of those golf balls head straight towards the road, where vehicles
I'm trying
travel.
to fix that slice, Jared. I'm working on it.
Yeah, exactly. So with the changed layout, this would change kind of where the par 5s are. They wouldn't be back to back necessarily. People would be warmed up, and by the time they are near Temple Road, that's in the middle of their game. So it should just create a better user experience and also reduce some of those conflicts we see with golf courses and roads.
Jared, I'd like to think, I mean, appreciate that more people are golfing, and obviously that means we're generating more revenue through this. I'd like to think that, in time, the game itself is paying for most of the improvements. What's the net on each round played? It sounds like we're really doing well with folks playing. Do you know off the top of your head?
The net per round, I don't. I know that we are generating 70 to 80,000 a month. So we're projected approximately 425,000 based on kind of last year's numbers for revenue, and our operating expense is around 235 usually. So
yeah, that's
quite the profit we're making right now, and that's going to be held on to because we have a 60-year-old building right there. So we're going to have to look at that in the next decade as well, potentially. So it is the ambition for the golf course to be self-sufficient, and they just need a little nudge right now and a little investment from the larger parks department.
Thank you.
So when will we see that kind of planning where the golf course is self-sufficient? Because this is I'm very supportive of a community golf course, but 450,000 is a huge outlay for this kind of project, especially when we're denying 100,000 here and 100,000 there as being excessive for other projects.
So this large of a price tag is what happens when you let things kind of, deteriorate and fall away. So this is more comprehensive. With preventative upkeep and maintenance, we can address these all along the way, patch holes, patch cracks, fix rough spots, and that can be all absorbed within operating. So the goal is to make this investment now and not have to make it for a long time again. So preventative maintenance just reduces the price tag on everything moving forward.
This has been a long time coming too, right? I mean, ever since I've been on the council, every year, it seems like they're talking about trying to find money to do it, so.
Jared, my only concern with this is the timing. And what I mean by that is, the first request here was the Carpenter Nature Preserve Master Planning, which we've continued, and hopefully Councilor Culp and Councilor Choi have a good experience out there. It's something I think we should do. 450 grand is a lot of money. Personally, I'd kind of love to see, if we did approve it, the master planning to come back and say, here's how much money we need for that piece. And here's how much money we've got. We've got $450,000 less. We worried that we'd spend it here and then suddenly say, geez, we could have better spent it there. It's kind of my only hesitation in saying yes today. Again, Council Vice President Plunkett's point, it's been a long time needed. I've bumped along those courses. It's in good shape. The course is outside of the paths. But that's my hesitation, is the timing, is to say, all right, why don't we master plan this, figure out how we fund that, and if there's leftovers, let's spend it on the golf course instead of spending it now, sort of vice versa.
And the only thing I would say to that, I guess, is so when the Parks Department folded into the larger general fund, there were funds earmarked specifically for parks from our reserves. So this would come from that, understanding that, which was kind of set aside for these capital improvements. So we have brought this before the park board, and they are in support of this investment, knowing that it'll decrease our kind of earmarked funds moving forward. And really the advantage of this fall is to not impact the entire 2022 season, because next year we'd have to wait for things to be less soggy, right? And for the asphalt to be at the appropriate temperatures to cure, which is going to close, March, April, which are our early bird 2 months of the year. So when you're only generating revenue for 6 months out of the year, we're just trying to limit that impact moving forward.
Looking at this, I mean, it's a revenue generating department. I think it's worth the investment because it's going to pay itself off eventually.
Sure.
And that little course is gorgeous. And I mean, they put that sprinkler system in. I mean, you guys, it looks awesome.
Mike and his team are doing a fantastic job. We're incorporating some natural elements with the native grasses on the edges, and that was well received.
Nice.
So
it's really nice. I guess my only point is that I have no problem investing into something that makes money.
Sure.
So are you saying this appropriation that you're asking for was originally earmarked in the reserves?
This specifically was not delineated from that reserve. That is a large lump of cash that was folded in and earmarked when the consolidation happened at the beginning of this fiscal year.
How much was in those reserves? Does it?
3.2 million.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So we have money in those.
It was this, and was it fire? Was that the other one?
Yeah, I was just going to remind the council that one of the things we did is, because those two budgets were being folded into the general fund budget, we did ask that they come back with each project for an additional appropriation request so that we could evaluate, case by case what the council wanted to spend versus just having the administration be able to make those decisions. So I think that was a good point that you made, Jared, that this was something that I know had been talked about kind of conceptually by the Parks Department previously over the last 3, 4, 5 years, maybe. So
And I'll note one more thing. 100,000 was allocated within the golf fund for this year, already approved. So we would not spend the full 450 of this. This is just contingency. And rather than put a Band-Aid on something, improve this for the next foreseeable years and not have to worry about it for a while. So
So what portion of this 450 is going to be used for correction of drainage on the course? Do you have any idea? Are you budgeting 100,000 for drainage?
So for drainage, yeah, approximately just under that, around 80, we're saying. But a lot of that engineering work is hopefully going to be conducted in-house. So there's going to be cost saving on the engineering with that. We're working with Lance. So to incorporate those changes alongside this project this fall, to improve drainage immediately. Now, it is a tricky site. You can imagine being in a floodplain. There are some issues. So half of the site we're looking at improving with gravity drains, but the other half is going to have to look into a larger permanent pump system to move that water across the course. So that'll kind of be the next capital investment within the golf course as they generate revenue.
And again, that has nothing to do with the 450.
Correct.
Okay. I'm a big fan of taking our assets that we currently have and making them continue to serve into the future. And, you know, whether it's a parking lot that already exists or these paths that are just beyond deterioration. And I really, I hope I'm for this.
Move for approval.
Got a first from Counselor Choi, second from Counselor Culp. Amy, I don't think we need to do a roll call here. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the golf course path improvements, which is a part of resolution 2021-15 is approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. Thanks,
Thank you
Jared.
all.
Appreciate it. Councilors, any other matters? We've got claims. Any questions on claims from any councilors?
Did we get clarification on the legal that we?
Yeah, so we, you guys will notice there's a carryover claim from last month for another law firm that was added to the mayor's budget and claim. Following the meeting, we were told the claim was used for consultation for the Municipal Action Center. For me personally, it still feels like an effort to circumvent the appropriation denial from March, but in communicating with our attorney, she's kind of instructed us to pay the claim in an effort to avoid any legal fees or late fees as it was a budgeted expense. I would note the description is different on this recent claim, which I think helps me as it's listed as a process re-engineering, a little more transparent. So
I'm curious, just from the legal standpoint, we approve a budget. And then if the administration goes and signs a contract that wasn't within that budget, I understand that there's a legal risk of being sued for that money. What power, authority, how do we control not overspending the budget if we're going to be, I don't understand.
Yeah, so it's my understanding that that particular claim came out of the personal services portion of the budget that was approved by the council. So there is a certain allocation that was given.
Right.
As we go forward to 2022, one of the things that we've talked about is potentially limiting the amount that is in personal services. So if you wanted to have more transparency on the front end, then there would have to be an additional appropriation request made so that the council and the public understood, further sort of what that was going to be used for and that there was a buy-in, that money was a good investment. But given the fact that it was already out of a personal services allocation, that's where the contract was signed for. So there's budgeted money available. I think it's more about what is it being spent on.
Right.
And so, my concern in talking to council leadership is this was a services rendered by a vendor. And I don't think it's fair to put the vendor in a position to not be paid for services provided. So it's really more in the communication between the administration and the council on spending priorities. And
no, I totally agree. It's not the vendor at all. But I also don't know that there is any money left in that bucket. We haven't gotten an update on what's been spent through the year in any of the budgeting. So I'll say that that I would like to see before the next claims. I'll go ahead and vote on this, but before the next claim, from the administration, I'd love to see what we've spent year to date, because we have no idea what we have left. We haven't been provided that information, I mean, since the budget was approved.
And I will say on this particular claim, one of the additional pieces of information that we were able to get was a copy of the contract. So I did review it. It was for just for the public, the claim that we're referring to is for Fakery, Drinker, and Biddle. And it's actually on the consulting end. So they have a consulting arm of their law firm that's not traditional legal services. They weigh in on a variety of different sort of process-oriented projects, which I believe this is what that was for. But we did review it. And again, I think just ultimately decided that the vendor had completed the work, the vendor had performed the services that were contracted for, and it wasn't really fair to put the vendor in the position of not being paid.
So here's kind of, I think, the what happens, Councilor Trailer, or how it gets frustrating, and I share that frustration, is we are presented with a budget that says we are going to do A, B, and C. And we say, well, that sounds like good. We approve it. And in the case, for example, of our Mayor's Action Center, we said, well, we don't want to spend $300,000 on a brand new building. And so instead of them saying, okay, we won't do it, they said, oh, all right, well, we're just going to, instead of spending A, B, and C, we're going to spend it on the Mayor's Action Center. And we have no visibility to that, right? And so what's not being communicated is when an appropriation is requested and denied, and then money is shifted around within the fund, which is within their right, what is now not being spent that was communicated to the public and to this council and sold to this council to pass a budget that is being used now to pay for things that we didn't agree to. And so through that appropriation process, we can say, all right, we agree that you should spend on an A, B, and C. And if something changes, and sometimes things change, it's the responsibility then of that department that is making the change to come back to this council and to the public and say, okay, A is no longer valid, we need to do D. And there is a public discussion about that change. There's a vote on that change. And there's an agreement or a disagreement on that. And I think that helps put some controls around what I feel right now there's not a lot of clarity on what's happened. So I share that frustration, and I think we're learning from those mistakes and can put those guardrails in place, not as something that is an impediment to getting things done, but allows for the communication of what is intended to be done and what changes happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a job we were elected to do, and I feel like at a certain point we're not doing a good job if we can't keep track where the money's going.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Any other conversation on claims? I'll make a motion then to approve claims.
Second.
Second from Councilor Choi. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Very good. Claims are approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second from Vice President Plunkett. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion to adjourn is approved by a vote of 7 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, September 7th, 2021 at 7:00 PM in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Note that 8 shift because of the Labor Day holiday, and final notice will be posted in compliance with Indiana open door law. Thanks, everyone.